So can't possibly.
And we are live. Welcome to NBA Live Before Lock. It is Sunday, January 29th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by Eric Lindquist. We are brought to you by No House Advantage, and I know that because it's behind Eric's head, and I didn't know it before that. 3-game NBA slate coming up for today. Most of you are probably watching football. Honestly, I don't blame you for doing that, but let's be clear here. Putting the game on in the background and watching us is going to be more entertaining than watching an NFL game. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Eric, what's up?
I knew you were going to diss football within the first 30 seconds. Like that was like a free square. Minus 10,000 favorite was you bashing the game of American football within 30 seconds of this show starting. Glad that the truck hit.
Tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not. There's been some good games this postseason. I will say that, but for the most part, I'm with you. It's been a bad product for about 2 years. Outside of Mahomes, outside of Burrow at times, there's just not a lot of good football that exists on TV anymore. And this entire Eagles game is just tilting me to no end. I can't believe how bad both teams are playing, and Brock Purdy gets hurt in the first series. Like, you got to be joking me. This is just atrocious.
I know that I'm right if Adam Scher is tweeting about how unwatchable NFL is in comparison to soccer and meaning it. That's when I know that I'm right. Because he doesn't want to say that. That's true. If he's willing to tweet that, then I know that I'm right.
You act like I know something going on Twitter right now.
Oh, I totally forgot that you're in purgatory.
Never to return again. Truly the dumbest shit that's ever happened to me. Like, I can't imagine somebody getting banned for something less egregious than what I tweeted out.
I'm going to read your face, okay? I have a question for you. I'm going to read your face. I'm going to know you're lying if you're lying. You ready?
Ready.
Do you have a burner?
No.
Jordan, you think he has a burner?
Yeah, I started it last week. Yeah, it's not a burner, though. I never had a burner.
Is the dog commenting on sports news?
No, people say nice things about analysts here that aren't you. That's a thing that can happen. And it just so happens, I get some love and I don't have to be the one to tweet it out.
Oh, people will say nice things about me? Weird. Let's look at the tweets from 3 years ago. This is my time hop right now. This is on my phone.
I'm ready.
I'm going to read this out loud. At Josh Engleman, I'm going to break your ugly ass Jew with the asterisk for an E face if I ever see you blocking me on YouTube for no reason. Hold on. That's not the best one. I wish it was Josh Engleman instead of Kobe. These are tweets sent to me, everybody. Those are sent to me. Yes. So thank you. Thank you to our fans out there for supporting the show for 3 years. That got tweeted the same day that he passed, by the way. Yeah, that happened. Those are real. That's not me making that up. Those are real tweets that were sent to me. Yep. Yes, they were.
That is the funniest thing that I have ever heard in my life. Josh, I'm glad it was you. I'm glad it wasn't you.
Not Jewish, by the way. Not that I'd have a problem with it. It seems like it's a good time. Not me, unfortunately.
Somebody just said that is not Mamba mentality. That is
sure hilarious. Sure isn't. So yeah, that happened. Yeah, so not a lot of great tweets coming in for me, but yeah, that happened to be in my time hop for today, 3 years ago.
I take
however many years ago.
I take everything back. If I had a burner, I would be giving you just all the love. That's what I would be doing.
Do we want to talk some basketball?
Yeah. There's only one way to go is down now. That was incredible. But yes, let's party.
All right, let's just talk game by game. We should be able to fly through most of this. We'll start Indiana Pacers. By the way, let's just start with the holistic view of this slate. The Pacers are 8.5-point dogs in Memphis. The Clippers are 10-point dogs in Cleveland. The Pelicans are 11.5-point dogs in Milwaukee. We are fixing to get a really ridiculous slate today.
Yeah, I talked about it before the show a little bit, where I'm looking at playing some guys that are a little bit off the reservation, a little bit different, if you will, trying to find paths to get some low-owned pieces like Tyus Jones if things blow out there for Memphis, getting to some really deep pieces on the Milwaukee side going up against the Pelicans who are completely shorthanded. And then at the same time, there's just obvious places to go because we have incredible value. And it's just one of those slates. It's going to be one of those slates that you try to find one or two pieces of really low-owned pieces, if you will, that might not get run if it weren't a 20-point game, 25-point game, but we're going to have some lopsided games, it would seem like, and going to be fun trying to find who that piece is.
Well, let's start it off with Indiana. We can take a quick lap through the Pacers. Like I said, 8.5-point dogs in Memphis, 241 total, which is 12 points higher than the New Orleans game and 27 higher than Clippers Cleveland. So it is a game that people are paying very close attention to. For the Pacers, they've got everybody healthy now, except for Tyrese Halliburton. We also have Miles Turner playing on his fresh new re-extension contract with a bunch more money for this season. We're getting heavy ownership to Hield, to McConnell, to Turner. We're getting a little bit more to Mathurin and Duarte. I don't really have too much here to say for Indy. I think most of this makes sense. I do think Hield and McConnell and Turner should be getting some love. I got a little bit more Mathurin than the field, which I've tended to have as of late, but I get it. Like, if you think this game stays competitive, you want some pieces from Indiana. This is an incredible game environment.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And TJ McConnell, I think one of the more interesting parts of this 3-game slate is how much ownership is going to specific guys at point guard. We have John Morant pulling 66% ownership, TJ McConnell 41%, Jose Alvarado 33.3% at the moment. Those three are absorbing so much. So if you find any ways to get off of one of those three, it would seem as though you're getting a different build than the rest of the field. But TJ McConnell, no doubt about it, in this role without pretty much any other unencumbered minutes that are going his direction. He's playing nearly 40 minutes a night. It's really hard to get away from him in some of these spots. And I get it, 33, 32, it started to taper off a little bit, but he's over a fantasy point per minute guy. There's still no Tyrese Halliburton. He's still sub 7K. So it's a broken tag. I will say out of the three popular point guards, though, he's probably the one I'm the most inclined to get away from, that being John Morant, just compared to what their current ownership is. And then Jose Alvarado at 4,600. We know that he can be a good fantasy point per minute guy, 2.9 on the season. I feel as though TJ McConnell might be the guy that I end up shorting the most, but I haven't finished out my lineup, so that's not a for sure thing.
TJ McConnell is the guy that I'm shorting the most as of right now. Morant and Jose Alvarado are my two most exposed players for today, but McConnell I'm a bit under on. Scares the hell out of me for sure. But price tag is up to 6,900. He's like appropriately priced now. Could he pay that off on a day, like on a 3-game slate? If he gets to 40 fantasy points, you're pretty happy with him at 6,900. I'm going to hope that it doesn't break as well for McConnell. And like I said, I'm a little bit over on Mathurin right now, which I think probably plays well for that sort of, if I don't have McConnell, I think I'd rather have Mathurin situation.
Yeah, I think that's right. I wouldn't put like a rule in place to take a little off the projection, but for sure, I'm more inclined to play them opposite of each other. So I'm with you there. Buddy Hield, he's about appropriately owned. He just is the kind of guy that on a 3-game slate, it's just scary if you're under the field on it because you know he's going to play upper 30s minutes. You know what that ceiling can be. But him and Mathurin, I mean, Mathurin's another guy that tag is just starting to go up, up, up. And we have some better plays, I think, that exist on this slate at the position. So he's just kind of a dude who's showing up in lineups for me. But as it stands right now, it's just a team overall that I seem to be a little bit lower on.
Do you have any interest in flat 3K Jalen Smith? It is a 3-game slate. He's got the power forward eligibility as well. He had been out of the rotation for a day, but came back in it on Friday, played some of the backup center minutes. They missed one with Terry Taylor or whoever you want to call the center at that time. But, you know, the type of guy where if something happens to Miles Turner, probably Jalen Smith. It could be Isaiah Jackson still. Do you like the backup center situation here?
I would rather go Hernan Gomez from the Pelicans. I think that if I'm looking at blowout run, like specifically what could happen to somebody, if I'm going to go to a flat 3K, I think Hernan Gomez is probably the guy, given he's pulling more ownership at the moment. But if you wanted to take that shot, he does have the power forward eligibility. You're just playing him hoping he spikes 16, 18 minutes, mainly garbage time, I would assume, in that kind of a capacity, which is definitely live for this game. I'm thinking about Tyus Jones, so I can't say, hey, I don't have interest in Jalen Smith. But as it stands right now, if I'm going down to 3K, I'm playing Hernan Gomez right now.
Okay. We will get to him shortly. I don't have much else to say here. Like, I'm a little light on Hield. I have his under on Prize Picks, by the way. Tweeted that out earlier today. Under for raw points, I believe. Under on TJ McConnell, neutral on Miles Turner. Look, 7,300 for Miles Turner with the way that he's been playing 32 plus minutes a night. Maybe he wants to celebrate that new contract because he basically doubled up his money yesterday. That's
he's
fine.
Really popular though. Like I'm a Zubats stan, so that's always going to be the case. And today I find his ownership to be egregious. So for me, looking at Miles Turner, it's just he's pulling double the ownership of Zubats. I can't talk myself into doing that currently for what, $1,700 more on DK. It's just kind of feels a little bit counterintuitive to me. So the Pacers as a whole, I'm just a little bit lower on.
It's interesting because Turner is sort of the highest dollar pay up center. Giannis has it at 11.6. The next highest dollar center is Miles Turner at 7.3. There's a $4,300 gap. So when you see that, you tend to end up getting to the extremes of both. Like, I have Miles Turner projected as the second highest projected center eligible guy. And I don't have a huge stand. Like, I'm holding hands with the field right now. So it's not the two guys that I'm well over the field on at center are a guy that we're going to talk about in this next team, Jaren Jackson, and a guy that we're going to talk about on this next team, Brandon Clark.
Yeah. And we still assume Nembhard isn't going to be starting, correct?
I'm assuming that he's not. I'm just going with whatever we got from Friday.
Gotcha. Yeah, me too. I just wanted to check on that Duarte last piece that I'm getting to a little bit, but again, 14%, no thank you.
All right, let's go over to Memphis then. For the Grizzlies, doubtful tag on Desmond Bane. I don't think that's changed, or did he get ruled out officially? I think it was still doubt. No, he is officially out now. Adams out, Danny Green out, John Conchar out, Kenny Lofton and Kennedy Chandler are both available. We'll start with the elephant in the room here. Ja Morant, 10-2 on DraftKings, 10 flat on FanDuel, basically 70% owned. I agree with it. I've got 85% Ja right now. I had slightly more earlier. I did give a slight usage bump to Giannis to try to save myself at least a little bit, but I have Ja in just about everything. To me, he just looks absolutely fantastic. This game environment, his personal rates, I'm having trouble getting away from him. Are you feeling the same way?
Yes. So you're looking at a guy at point guard that just projects out a landslide ahead of everybody else. And I said it before, TJ McConnell is kind of being sacrificed at the altar of Ja Morant and Jose Alvarado, who I just prefer, one being expensive, one being cheap. But Ja Morant, from a raw points perspective, Giannis, he's been awesome. 11-6. I'm not sure what to make of what his minute ceiling is in some of these spots. He doesn't really need more than 34. We just saw a 70 spot from him last time out. But you do have a lot of question marks around how that rate is going to maintain now that you finally have Chris Middleton back in the fray. And Chris Middleton, God forbid he had gone over 29.5 points plus rebounds plus assists last game. But even 15, 16 minutes of him on the floor, that's going to cut into him. Now, that being said, Bobby Portis is still absent there. So that's an increase for Giannis as well. But Ja Morant, just in terms of spend ups, where else do you want to spend up? We don't have either of the studs from the Clippers. We don't have any of these healthy bodies from the Pelicans, be it Zion, CJ McConnell. So lots of opportunities to find your specific pay ups. And that's where him and Giannis just stand out on a different tier. I'm over the field on both. I think it's pretty easy to get over the field on both. And yeah, that's just kind of what I'm planning to do.
Yeah, Giannis at 11.6, Morant at 10.2. Then you drop all the way down to Garland at 8,800. You don't normally see that sort of split for salary at the top. Let's talk about the rest of this team, which I think is pretty easy to talk about. Dillon Brooks is in the 30s in ownership. Brandon Clark is in the 40s in ownership. Jackson is in the 30s in ownership. They are the three other best guys on Memphis. I am over the field on all four of these Memphis guys. I don't necessarily One of them is probably not going to do what I need them to do, although that could be fine on a 3-game slate. But they project so much better for me than everybody else. The total in this game is so much better. The pace of this game is so much better that I'm sort of just rotating through those 4 guys as much as I possibly can. How are you treating the rest of Memphis?
Yeah, it's a 241 total. It's crazy. And we've seen Jaren Jackson Jr. start to get back in some foul trouble. I think he's the guy that I really want to access for what that ceiling can be. 40% for him. If you had him stay out of foul trouble, which is a big if when it comes to Triple J, but there are a couple of smashes that would have been in his recent box scores. The field is starting to get there, so we'll be paying attention to that as we get closer to lock here, where 40% is a lot different than 30, 35% on this 3-gamer. But I'm with you. Brandon Clark, 5,300, still not enough. Still going to be getting well over the field for him. He's just been a staple of my lineups the last 2 games. You look at the matchup on the other side, I don't see any reason they would go to Tillman here again. Feel pretty confident it's going to be Brandon Clark. Talked about that 2 games ago for them when they were facing Golden State and then Minnesota. Even going up against Rudy Gobert, it was nice to see because he wasn't a part of that Western Conference matchup that they had last season. So it was a little bit of a different question mark. Seeing Brandon Clark start there, very nice for his minutes, 28 minutes there. Feel like that's the floor for him if this game stays competitive. So Brandon Clark, just a no-brainer kind of play. Dylan Brooks, a dude who's just showing up in lineups. I'm not all that enthusiastic. I don't know how you could be clicking on Dylan Brooks, but just another dude who's showing up. I'm with you. I'm just kind of overweight to this team, whereas Indiana being sacrificed to these Memphis pieces.
Joseph Ramirez, Memphis is playing at home, so add an extra stock for Triple J. There you go.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was such a weird Reddit. Greg talked about that a little bit earlier in our group thread, and apparently there were two questionable ones out of all of the tape all year. What a ridiculous thing. People need to stop asking for refunds, and they need to stop making shit out of nothing.
Yeah, look, it is not all home cooking scoring exists. John Wall had a staggering assist rate in Washington in comparison to his road games. That was well known throughout the fantasy industry for a while. I mean, if you want to go all the way back to John Stockton type stuff, none of this is new. You can't look at percentage changes on blocks and steals because they're such infrequent events that the percentage difference can just be skewed by a game or two. Do I everybody's projections already take into account that you're projecting home teams slightly better and road teams slightly worse, or at least any projection system worth a salt should.
Correct. Yeah, and it's minute, but it's still noticeable. And there's
S&P hit it too. The league reviews this stuff. It's not up to the local scorekeeper either.
Yeah, they would overturn it and fire the person. They have a job that has to kind of be upheld. If somebody's not going to do it somewhat accurately, they're going to remove that person and put somebody else there. So it doesn't feel like something you should be overthinking.
I don't know if you did it already. I don't think he did. If you did, my apologies. I feel like Adam in this one. Talk to me about Tyus Jones.
All right. So this was kind of the guy that I circled. I've tried to circle a piece or two where if XYZ happened, here you go. He played 19, 20 minutes the last 2. Obviously, you have John Morant in there, but for me, it's just simply looking at the matchup on the other side. You're going to get TJ McConnell out on the floor a lot. You're going to get Andrew Nembhard out on the floor a lot. Buddy Hield. The game previous to that, as you're looking at just from a matchup perspective, going up against Minnesota, I guess Jalen Noel would have been the guy that he would have matched up a little bit there. Not thinking about it in terms of specific matchups, but Tyus Jones, I think, has an opportunity to run into 24 minutes by playing well. And they've been showing that they can play him and John Morant together this entire season. So it's not a frequent event. It's not something that I'm going crazy out of my way to say, oh, I project Tyus Jones for 24. But in terms of range of outcomes, you could see this game get out of hand. And you could see Tyus Jones walk into 22, 24 minutes, just absent Desmond Bane. And both of those outcomes are pretty realistic. And it's a guy who's a fantasy point per minute producer. So if you're trying to find somebody to make a case for on today's slate to get away from really, really good chalk, I think the way you have to do it as a tiebreaker is just look at a good fantasy point per minute producer, look at how they could walk into those opportunities. And then, not necessarily having to say, I can't have John Morant in those lineups. I am more inclined to play Tyus Jones without John Morant in a game where maybe Ja just plays 3 quarters and then you get all the garbage time run for Tyus. But I think there's events where the two of them can work out just fine in lineups together. So It's just a piece that I think at 6%, I have being optimal a little bit better than that. So I'm getting to him.
Yeah, I do too. So here's the problem. Like, I think he grades out well. I think he's under-owned. I still didn't get to him. And those are the spots where like I'll look back at it like tomorrow and just be like, why didn't I do something to like try to get a little bit more? Because just individually looking at him, he grades out as someone that I would expect to have like 15% of when he's 6% owned, and I have him in one lineup right now. I don't like that. I lean more towards your thought process. If I were like, I guess I wouldn't say the same thing about if I were playing like a single lineup, because then I really wouldn't be looking at Tyus Jones. But I'm in a situation now where it's not ever something like I'm never going to just make a manual adjustment for something like this. That's just not the way that I'm ever going to operate. But if I were going to ever do that, Tyus Jones would be at the top of the list for today.
Yeah, it's not like I'm saying we gotta try to find our 1 point of deviation and then that's that, and I'm gonna play him instead of Ja Morant. Like, that isn't the case. We get an ensemble of lineups. We don't have to play one specific lineup on any given slate. A lot of people do. A lot of people play just 20 lineups or something. You have your own process, but like, if you're playing more than a couple lineups here today, I think it's pretty realistic to think that if Ja Morant fails at 66%, who's the primary reason that he does fail for? It's probably Tyus Jones benefits. So for me, it's more of like on just a 3-game slate, it's a pretty easy dice to roll. If this were a 9-game, 10-game slate where you have a lot of other options, it would be a very, very thin, difficult play to talk myself into. So for me, it's more of just like looking at what the extreme range of outcomes are and trying to just carve out that small little block where if things do break my way, I can play really good chalk around him and have it be really, really successful.
Do you want to touch on anything else from the Grizzlies?
Xavier Tillman, I think just because it is a 3-game slate, you could see some kind of a foul issue for Jaren Jackson Jr., for Brandon Clark, even in very limited minutes. We're talking 13, 16 minutes. He's been viable as a fantasy producer the last couple of games. He's 2%. He's a nearly fantasy point per minute producer. I think just for that alone, there's reason to maybe take that shot. You can play Giannis at power forward. You can play Ja at point guard. If you're trying to get to that 3K spot, you have Hernan Gomez that's sitting there too, but Xavier Tillman, just 3,500. I think he's a guy that if he shows up in a couple lineups for you, you're not crazy.
Okay.
Not that you should be prioritizing him.
I guess we should probably touch on Santi Aldama too, who we have at 19% ownership. That is not somebody that I'm getting to right now. I did give him 21 minutes. I think that you could see a couple minutes of him alongside like guys that he's not normally playing alongside, but 18.5% ownership seems just a hair high for me.
Yeah, for a guy who's going to get maxed out around 20 minutes in a competitive game. If you're playing Aldama, I would think you're hoping for this game to blow out quite a bit. I'm with you. Yeah. 3,200 with just power forward eligible or eligibility. That's pretty easily a pass for me.
Okay.
If you were unowned, like if you were 10%, I would get there.
Yeah, we're on the same page then. I just think if he's going to be in 19% of the lineups, I'm just going to hope that he's not the guy that you have to have today, and I'm going to be in a much better spot.
There's so many other guys that are 19% owned. If we're just talking pure ownership, like there's so many other guys that exist there that I am far more inclined to take shots on, like far more inclined to say, even in that range, like at the 3K range. I mean, I keep going back to Hernan Gomez. I know that he's a little bit less popular at 15%, but like, I can see a pretty clear path for how Hernan Gomez destroys a slate in a blowout. And I think he's a better fantasy producer. I think he's more certain to get blowout run. I feel like there's just better dice rolls out there than a guy who's popular, who's not, over a fantasy point per minute guy.
Hit that like button, folks. 840 people. I'm not going to lie. That's a pretty good showing for what we've got going on in the NFL season. So I appreciate you guys being here. Hit that like button if you haven't done it already. We got to talk a little bit about No House Advantage, the presenting sponsor of this show. I did a No House Advantage NBA show on Friday, and I called Chris Middleton's under on his points, rebounds, and assists a lock. And I specifically said that was terminology that I don't ever use, but that there was no real way that he was going to be able to get there, save for just playing an amount of minutes that you would have never expected. Well, he didn't play that amount of minutes, but boy, oh boy, did he give it a run. He went absolutely nuts in like 14 minutes. It's still won. Let's be clear here. It's still won, but he turned it into a bit of a sweat. The reason that I liked it so much is because on our No House Advantage projection screen, which is free at stokastic.com, by the way, it was projecting as like 99.8% to be the under. But Eitan and I were all over it. You guys should have been too. The easiest way for you to be all over something like that, click the link in the description of this video, head on over, make a deposit. They will match any deposit up to $100. So you put in 100, you're going to get another 100. For today, you've already missed out on sizable overlay from the NFL contest. Shame on you for doing that. 10K slam dunk going off for tonight. 5K to first is still 41% filled. That means 59% of the entries have not come in yet. Use the projections that I just talked about that are totally free, or use the No House Advantage optimal lineups page where you don't even have to do any work. We've already made the lineups for you. They cost you nothing based on all of the projections that we have already set up for the day. This is an absolute no-brainer for you guys. Take advantage of the deal, build up your bankroll, get a little bit of extra money in your pocket at No House Advantage. Couldn't get any easier than that. Michael McKinney, 5 must plays in FanDuel Cash.
That's his typical question. So TJ McConnell, I know, has a ridiculous, egregious tag over on FanDuel, as does Ja Morant. I think Ja was 10K. Let me just wait for it to pull up, and then I'll talk. Yeah, Ja Morant is 10K. You've got Giannis sitting there. Just because of the eligibility, I think you probably just find ways to play both of them on this slate. Talked about it on DK, where you just want to find your way to both of those pieces. Jose Alvarado, a piece that I'm very high on, 4,500 on FanDuel. That's impossible to get away from. Then it kind of becomes interesting because you have Brandon Clark, Norman Powell, TJ McConnell, even at 7,700, wildly different, but I still think you probably play that in cash. Yeah. And then I will go the Norman Powell side, just slightly over Brandon Clark. No, I'll go the Brandon Clark side at 6K and then figure out the rest. Those are 5.
I think it's Morant, Alvarado, and Giannis for me to start. And I would go Brandon Clark and Dylan Brooks. Brooks, because he's shooting guard, small forward, just is going to cross 2 different positions. 5,200 is going to be lower priced than everybody above him from an ownership perspective. I think he's just more likely to fit into a cash lineup easy in comparison to everybody else. I have no issues with Norm Powell. I have no issues with TJ McConnell. Those guys are probably in that lineup as well. You're working those guys in too. I think Dylan Brooks just helps from a fit perspective.
Good point.
All right, let's talk Clippers. We're going to have a lot less to say about the rest of these games, at least the rest of these games, save for the Pelicans, comparison to the game number 1. Game number 1 was the one that we had to talk about. For the Clippers, they're 10-point dogs in Cleveland, 214 total. This is like the AIDS version of a game on a slate. Donovan Mitchell, I'm on the Cleveland side of it, but we've got all these Q tags and guys that are in or out. I started on Cleveland. I should start on the Clippers. No Paul George, no Kawhi Leonard, no John Wall, no Robert Covington. Q tag on Marcus Morris, Luke Kennard, and Reggie Jackson. Moses Brown is in the G League. They could be incredibly limited for players. As of right now, I'm just assuming that the Q tags are in, but who the hell knows? This is a back-to-back. Marcus Morris has missed the past 2 games at this point in time. Luke Kennard had missed a ton of time and is just working his way back. This is gross, but for right now, I think Norm Powell feels pretty safe at 6K. When I say safe, I mean he kind of just has to be out there. He's one of the guys that plays a lot and doesn't have a Q tag. Powell's ownership seems reasonable. Terrence Mann's ownership seems reasonable. Ivica Zubac's ownership seems very reasonable. Those 3 guys, I don't have much of an issue with getting to because they seem like guys that kind of have to play 30 minutes today.
Correct. Yeah, I'm with you. I think those 3 specifically at the top make a lot of sense. Norman Powell, the eligibility, shooting guard, small forward as well. 6K for him, just slam. 4,100 for Terrence Mann. Pretty simple for me to look at a guy who just sees a big bump without all the other pieces that exist out there. No Kawhi, no Paul George. Makes all the sense. For me, the Zubats thing is just wild to me. It's very, very wild that he is sub 20% for me. I have him being optimal almost 30% of the time. And oh my God, we just got all of that Clippers news pretty much on cue. So I'll let you list that off.
Marcus Morris out, Reggie Jackson out, Luke Kennard in. So I'm going to hit on it now because Mann is 1, Zubats 2, Powell 3, Batum 4, Kennard 5, Coffee, Boston, Preston, Diabate. The Clippers have 9 bodies available. As best I can tell, Moses Brown is with the G League. I'm going to pull up their injury report right now just to double check that he is still listed as out. There's the 5:30 report. Clippers, Moses. Okay, Moses Brown is available now. He was listed as out earlier. Moses Brown is available. So that's 10. I would assume he's going to be ahead of Moussa Diabate, but everything that I just said before is kind of thrown into the, like, nothing matters now. We need to change this up. No Marcus Morris is massive, massive news for this spot. And no Reggie Jackson, also very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, it's gigantic. So Luke Kennard, I don't see. I'm not going to project him for more than 22 minutes.
I agree.
Think that is kind of a cap for him. I talked about it last slate. He got the surprise start from 2 games ago. It was against the Spurs. And everybody was like, oh, do I play? No, you did not play him. He played all of a grand total of 17 minutes, then 21. I'm just not going to project him that well. So that is a lot of minutes that even if you get the Luke Kennard starting like I expect, you're going to be giving to everybody else that's there. Like, we can have legitimate chance. Like, the Amir Coffey and Brandon Boston both existing is a little frustrating because if you just had one of the two, I would feel really, really good about it. I don't know which one I really want to prefer at this point in time. Probably looking at...
I prefer Coffey. I think Coffey's playing more minutes. Brandon Boston is a significantly bigger per minute fantasy guy.
Yeah, Brandon Boston by far. I mean, he can go out and get you a bucket, 0.9 fantasy point per minute player on the season. Going back to last year where he was a lot more fantasy viable at times, he has those spots where at 3K he can put up 30 and there you go. Hasn't been as frequent, but there haven't been minutes for him. There are so many minutes to be handing out to these guys. For me, Norman Powell is going to be my highest owned player probably, outside of maybe John Morant. Just kind of looking at my early builds here. I think you had talked about having a lot of him too. The field was at 66%. Zubats, the thing too is Moses Brown and Diabate, they're going to be a distant second to a guy like Zubats, who's going to get a lot of free reign to go out there. It's a difficult matchup, no doubt about it. 10-point dogs. You're going up against that front court of Mobley and Allen, but I almost just don't care. He's going to be the under-owned guy, it would seem, in that entire situation. 5,600. I don't think Moses Brown is going to cut into him all that much unless you're looking at a blowout scenario. But like Nicholas Batum at 4K, Brandon Boston now at 3K, Amir Coffey, I think could slide in and start as well. There's a lot of ways. I mean, we're going to have to see what that starting lineup is, but you should have tons of Clippers interest today.
I wouldn't be surprised if Coffey is starting right now. Mann is clearly starting. Powell is clearly starting to me. Zubats is clearly starting. I assume Batum is starting, and I think the final spot is either Kennard or Coffey.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kennard probably starts, but that's where I'm probably in the camp that I think Brandon Boston's probably the better play. If you don't get Amir Coffey starting, I have zero interest in playing him. Whereas Brandon Boston, I think there's at least a path for him to go out and play 22, 24 minutes in a blowout type scenario. And because he won't be starting, he'll pull zero ownership there. I just don't want to play a starting Amir Coffey still. That's just going to be a difficult sell for me.
I think you're underrepresenting how many minutes exist in this game. So I'm just trying to be as pessimistic as possible. 32 to Terrence Mann, backup point guard run to Jason Preston. 32 to Norm Powell, 32 to Ivica Zubats. I don't think it's possible for Moses Brown, Diabate, and Zubats to ever play on the floor alongside each other.
Agreed.
So I think you got to just pick one of those two guys, is my assumption, at least for right now. So I actually think that they're going to run no Moussa Diabate, barring a blowout. I'm just giving Moses Brown the backup center run. I don't know how many minutes that I really want to go to Nick Batum, but if I have 28 for Batum and 24 for Kennard, we're looking at a situation where there's 60 minutes left over for Amir Coffey and Brandon Boston. We either need to start handing out significant more minutes and go well north of those 32 marks for those starters, or Amir Coffey looks interesting by default.
It's probably the right way to say it. I'm going back to December 15th. I guess it was a little different situation. I mean, you had no Kawhi, no Paul George, but you had John Wall, Marcus Morris. I'm going to just kind of change those, but Amir Coffey started alongside Moses Brown, Terrence Mann. There was there was Diabate. He played 16 minutes there in that spot. Nicholas Batum came off the bench. If we just assume Nicholas Batum starts, we'll have him play the Marcus Morris role. He played 30 minutes in that game. They got completely demolished by the Suns. Like they're probably going to get completely demolished against the Cavs here, but you saw 24 minutes for Brandon Boston. You saw 23. Robert Covington, you got to take those away. Jason Preston was there. Good times. Just wild how thin this could end up being. Yeah, I mean, you saw 38 minutes in that game for Amir Coffey. So if he does start, I think you could give me 38 minutes of any starter in the NBA, even if they're Isaac Okoro or Tony Snell or whomever else we want to just say on the top of our heads has a low fantasy point per minute guy. They probably run into being interesting. I just think that if he's not starting, Brandon Boston's going to be the guy I try to take shots on.
This just became really ridiculous here for the Clippers. Like, I can give Brandon Boston 24 minutes. I'm having trouble going too much higher than 32 for any of the starters just because this is going to be, on paper, a wildly uncompetitive game. I don't think that we're just going to get, Norm Powell playing 36 minutes if they get, if the line is 10, then we're talking about 30% of the time that they're getting beat by 15 plus. That's really difficult to try to grab now. So I went to 24 on Boston. I think I almost have to go to 30 on Coffee. I just don't want that to show up as much, but we're 23 minutes away from lock at this point.
I'm pretty sure Kennard starts still. It seems like that's the thing where 23 and a half. What?
I'm with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Kennard. We talked about it already, but Powell, Zubats, Mann, Batum, Kennard. Pretty sure that's the starting lineup if I had to guess. I think that I still have no interest in Kennard. He would have to get really, really hot from three, and that would have to be a pretty wild scenario in 22 minutes where he would end up optimal. I think I'm just completely out on him still. Batum 4K, play him. Mann, play him. Zubats, play him. Powell, play him. The rest of it is weird for me. I think Brandon Boston just ends up being the guy that by default I'm just playing because I don't have Amir Coffey starting, but that would put Brandon Boston. If you put him for 24 minutes, I'm going to get way more of him than I probably want.
Yeah, that's I think that's what's happening to me right now. There's not even a relevant sample to look at for these guys with most of these guys out. That's just, we need to think about who's going to soak up this usage when some of these guys are off. When John Wall is off, Kawhi Leonard is off, and Paul George is off for this Clippers team. We've got 257 minutes of Norm Powell at this point this season. Norm Powell has a 31% usage rate. That's one guy right out of the gate that we know that we need to let rip. Terrence Mann probably looks a little bit better from a usage perspective at this point. We've got, who else is pulling heavy ownership when those three guys are off? Marcus Morris is typically a guy that sees a bunch. Brandon Boston is a guy that soaks up a lot of usage when he's on the floor, when the rest of these clowns aren't on the floor. And I think today is going to be one of those days where you get 25-ish% usage out of someone like Brandon Boston. The guy that's tricky to me is the guy that's most tricky to me is Nick Batum, because he can play anywhere from 20 minutes today to 34, and I'd believe any bit of it. I think the closer this game is, the more likely you're to see heavy minutes out of Nick Batum, and the less close this game is, the more likely you're going to see Nick Batum basically not play and Amir Coffey play well more. Right now, the way that I have my projections in, flat 3K Brandon Boston has become a very, very big problem for me for the Clippers. And then Terrence Mann, to me, at 4,100, having point guard small forward eligibility is the easiest Clipper to want to get to. Norm Powell, also fantastic for sure, but $1,900 more expensive than Powell, or than Mann. Definitely a better point per minute guy, but Mann's price makes it so it's really difficult for him to fail.
Agreed. I think the last guy that I'm going to maybe, I can't do the Jason Preston thing. I can't do it. He hasn't played more than 16 minutes in a game this season. He's just a dude who exists. It's more of a positional thing where I'm thinking about it. I think if the game stays remotely competitive, you're just getting tons of Powell and Mann playing at the guard spots. But Brandon Boston, it's more of just if the game gets sideways, what do you know is going to happen? I know for a fact Brandon Boston is going to have 25% usage. That's just what it is. So I'm with you where I think he's just the guy that you want to be making an educated guess ends up being the dude that can go out and chuck. Plus the shooting guard eligibility, kind of important.
We have Diabate, Brown, and Zubats projected for 62 minutes total. I would be surprised if we play 14, if those guys play 14 minutes alongside of each other in some kind of combination. But when you get situations like this, when you're so limited, you kind of like all logic and reason does sometimes come out, like go out the window a little bit. But that would surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, it's like the Miami Heat 8 player situation. We're not that dire, but it does seem to me as though when you have as many guys like Diabate, Brown, and Zubats who all play the same position, basically. Batum has played some small ball five there, but like I can't even imagine a scenario where they could have that lineup just with the current iteration of this team just coming off the bench, unless you're going to play Amir 40 minutes, unless you're going to play Batum. I mean, Batum's the guy that we're probably under projecting for minutes. Like if this game stays competitive,
I gave him 28. We have him at 31.
Okay, that's more of what I was thinking. I think he's live for like 36 if this game stays competitive, 36, 38.
That's what I'm saying. If we think that he can play 36 minutes, like that's just another situation where those big guys aren't playing alongside of each other.
Yeah. Man, this is just a wild
They usually throw big minutes at Amir Coffey in these situations. And because he's such a shit per minute guy, like I'm not surprised by it. I'm going to let it rip with what I have in here right now. Boy, oh boy, do I not. I don't like this pivot that's about to happen. I'm very afraid of what's about to show up for me in my projections and in my crunches because I liked my exposures prior to this. And now I certainly don't. I do need to set a quick group to make sure that I don't get Zubats and Moses Brown in the same lineup. I don't want to do that. At least, not a lot.
Are you getting to Moses Brown?
I assume that I'm going to. I mean, I gave him the backup center minutes. I gave him 16 minutes. And, he's flat 3K. I wouldn't be surprised if I get to him. I want to make sure that I don't ever get that combination, though. That's for sure. All right, let's see. As I run my dummy crunch. So what's interesting is it's 5:43. We're still on the Clippers. We have 3 teams we haven't even talked about.
You already
yet.
said you damned this before it even started. You're just like, oh, we're going to be quick with this team. And then boom. Everything.
I thought they were going to be in, if I'm being honest.
I did too.
It's weird. I'm not getting as much of the Clippers as I expected to.
I'm getting so much Nicholas Batum. It's disturbing. He's 11% right now in our projections.
Yeah, like he is not a guy that's popping up aggressively for me. I'm going to give him one more minute.
I gave him. You went to 28. We had 31 here. I put him for 32. So I'm probably the highest on everybody. Just where like the outcomes where this game stays close. I think he plays more. And then, by default, if I just put that projection up to like 32, I feel more comfortable knowing that I'm going to get to some of that range of outcomes when you put the randomness in. Whereas like I put him at 29, 28, I'm just not going to get him.
I went to 29. I don't know if I feel the same way. I'm not so sure that he's the guy that soaks up playing time here. If they're basically punting a game, I don't know why you put extra miles on Nick Batum on a day like today.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I am not getting to nearly as much of the Clippers on my dummy crunch as I expected myself to get when I just like looked at the data naturally. So we'll see what this crunch actually looks like as I knock it down to be like the one that matters for me. I'm not anticipating getting to a lot of the Clippers, a lot of the weird Clippers. I know why. I've been uploading the wrong shit. I was gonna say, like, this doesn't feel like something that's gonna be the case. I mean, like, these guys are all really good point per dollar plays. I don't know why that's not showing up. Well, because I'm limiting their exposures.
There it was.
They're all projected for no ownership. So ignore everything that came out of my mouth for the past 2 minutes. Now that I rerun this crunch, and this is like my sim crunch, so it's what I think everybody should be. I assume I see a lot more red climbing to the top. Yeah. So like, I do think they're relatively equal for Norm Powell, Man, Zubats, Amir Coffey, Brandon, Boston. They are still coming up a lot behind like the Grizzlies guys, the main Pacers guys, the main Pelicans guys. So I don't think that I'm going to be going too crazy, but clearly we have just created some value. And this very much opens up the more likely scenarios of having Ja plus Giannis now.
Correct. Yeah, if you didn't have that combination before, it'd be kind of weird for you not to. Like, you got two more 4K pieces that just stand out to me. Like, you're going to get Nicholas Batum into the mix. Terrence Mann, if you had any questions about it before, where, hey, what could that possibly look like? Well, I feel pretty confident in saying 35, 36 minutes is kind of what you're running into under most circumstances and most ways that this game stays competitive. Now, if it doesn't, we're looking more at that 29, 30 type thing that it looks like we have in the projections. And like, he's just a piece that's going to fit in nicely with lineups with point guard, small forward eligibility.
By the way, Grizzlies are starting Morant, Brooks, Williams, Clark, Jackson, as we expected. Pacers are starting McConnell, Duarte, Hield, Nesmith, Turner, as we expected. So that wasn't anything too crazy for what we were trying to look at. Let me hit on these super chats that came in before. Let me go ahead and make sure I still got them. McConnell, Hield, or Triple J in tiers. I assume that's Triple J. Yeah, that's Triple J for me.
Yeah, him and McConnell, but I'm assuming McConnell's going to be crazy owned.
Leaky Crease says, is 5 Clippers too many for single entry DK? I would say absolutely yes.
You shouldn't have more than 3.
And then Ace of Spades, another tiers question. Zubats, Mathurin, or Clark?
What was the first one?
Zubats, Mathurin, or Clark? That's Clark.
Yeah, see, Clark is the right answer, but also Zubats is going to be the lowest owned of all of them. And again, I am pretty firmly double the field on Zubats.
All right, so we hit those super chats. I got my crunch running. We've talked about the Clippers now. I mean, Cleveland could be a problem if we get I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say a problem, but they're live to not have Donovan Mitchell today. I think they're probably more live to not have Donovan Mitchell now than they were before. But right now it's a Q tag on Donovan Mitchell, a Q tag on Kevin Love. I have all of these guys in for right now. What are you doing with Cleveland? This was not a team that I was getting to in a big way previous to this. I was getting some Mitchell if he's in, a little bit of Allen, a little bit of Mobley, light on Darius Garland just in general. To me, they're the only 4 guys that you could actually play from Cleveland today. Yeah,
this could end up being your rake for the day, depending on how everything breaks down. Darius Garland would be a play, like priority play without Donovan Mitchell. 8,800 looks ridiculous, but like he's normally been projecting around 50 for me in some of these spots. Evan Mobley, 7,200. All the prices have started to come up. Karis LeVert, 5,500 would be a huge problem for me. If Donovan Mitchell gets ruled out, that's yet another guy that I think has burned enough people the last couple slates where I don't think his ownership would get anywhere reflective of like how good of a play he was. So I am pretty interested to see about Donovan Mitchell, as you would expect. It's pretty important news. Everything's important news on a 3-gamer, but Donovan Mitchell, if he's in, 8,700, can play him at shooting guard. Anything that avoids that point guard ownership of TJ McConnell, that of John Morant, Jose Alvarado, that's very important on the slate. I would be getting my way to as much of that at shooting guard as I possibly could if we got that news that he's officially in.
Okay. I'm going to just sort of gloss over the rest of... I don't have anything else to touch on for Cleveland. If you don't, I'd like to hit on New Orleans just because they're
totally
somebody
Let's
that
go to it.
People probably want to hear about. We don't have to tell anybody how cool it is to roster Giannis in fantasy, but New Orleans is unique for today because it's not just Brandon Ingram that's out. It's not just Zion that's out. It's not just Dyson Daniels that's out. CJ McCollum is also out. So we've got basically 15, or at least we did have basically 15% ownership going to Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall, Herb Jones, Joe Val, Larry Nance, Devontae Graham, and Willie Hernan-Gomez, with 30-something% going to Jose Alvarado at 4,600. Everything is sort of in play for the Pelicans. They look like a slightly better version than the Clippers for today in terms of just like real NBA players. I don't know if they feel the same way in terms of volume at this point. What were you getting to? What are you getting to for the Pels?
Yeah, it's a lot of the usual suspects. Jose Alvarado, 4,600, makes all the sense in all the land. You assume he starts. He's going to be Pretty important piece for my lineups, no matter what else shows up, depending on Cleveland stuff, depending on the Clippers starting lineup. This is also the last game of the night. You're pretty much just carving out that $4,600 for him over and over again. I'm not that high on the rest of the basketball team. And compared to the field, it would seem, compared to the field, Jose Alvarado, very clear cut for me. I think they just have enough bodies that they can do some weird shit and screw this up for you. Herbert Jones is at 4,200. I think he's secure into the minutes, but doesn't really see the kind of spike that you would really want to see absent McCollum, Ingram, Zion, in terms of just being able to score a basketball. That's not what he's out on the floor to do. Najee Marshall, 5,100, is showing up. I'm getting a little bit over the field. His ownership has started coming down, but I think he might end up more popular than you would think, 15.7%. I think people find it to be pretty easy to land on these guys. Right now, the guy I'm getting to second most out of the Pelicans is Trey Murphy, 4,800. I just think that there's actual upside with him to go out and shoot the basketball and do some of the things that you need to spike an upside to compete with other value. It's got to all be relative to what the other value you see on this slate being. And I don't know. I feel as though it's not as good of a play going to some of these Pelican spots as like what we surely have with Mann and Powell, with what we definitely have with Memphis. I'm not completely sold on this team.
So I've got a ton of Alvarado. Well, not a ton. I had a ton of Alvarado. I'm still over the field. I've got 47% Alvarado right now. I am getting to a ton of Najee Marshall and Trey Murphy, in particular Najee Marshall. I assume he's just starting and playing like 30 plus minutes like he had been playing before. He's 5,100. They don't have anybody else. He sees a really big usage rate bump when CJ McCollum, Zion, and Brandon Ingram are all off the floor. I am currently jamming Najee Marshall. He is my third most exposed player. I have rerun my crunch. I do have my lineups in now. Ja Morant is in all but one of them. I do have Giannis up to 48% now. That was something that I didn't have before this show had started. Dylan Brooks, my second most exposed guy. Very heavy to Alvarado, Brandon Clark, Miles Turner. Got a lot more Chris Duarte now than I was expecting. That's a thing, but
makes
2Xing Trey Murphy, as you mentioned. A little bit lighter on Trey Mann. I'm light on the Clippers in general. I'm about half the field on Powell, neutral on Zubats, neutral on Mann, well under on Nick Batum. Got random shares of basically everybody else, but no sort of volume. I'm hoping that one of those garbage Clipper guys aren't the linchpin to all of this, but my exposures have changed quite a bit, but everything rides on Ja Morant at this point.
I can't blame you. That's a pretty good place to put your eggs today.
I'm not mad about it. I do have quite a bit of overlap. Of the 150 lineups that I'm playing today, I can say for sure that Giannis, just in case anybody was curious, Antetokounmpo, I've got 47% of my lineups have both Giannis and Ja. The other 53% of my lineups have at least one of them. I don't have a single lineup that doesn't have one of Giannis or Ja.
It's that kind of a slate. It's pretty darn impossible to imagine a scenario where you shouldn't be playing those two.
Yep.
Impossible.
What are you doing anything else for Milwaukee? I've got a little bit of Drew. I've got 2X Brooke Lopez. I've got 2X Pat Connaughton. I don't have anything else here for Milwaukee.
It's kind of a team that you just get to because it's a 3-game slate. Nothing's a priority. They just show up. We got Donovan Mitchell is in. So there you go. I'm going to
thank God
do another thing. Kevin Love will also play. So last
That's
pieces
big.
of news here. So
I didn't want to rerun that shit.
Yeah. So I got to tone down a little bit. I was getting a little bit more Garland, but this makes everybody on the Cleveland side pretty unappealing outside of Donovan Mitchell for me.
Yep. Donovan Mitchell is the guy that I have the most of at this point, 16%. I've got a little bit of Jared Allen. I think he's still underpriced at 6,500. That game environment is just rough. It's really hard to want to get to too much of that Cleveland side. We'll see where that actually ends up. We're 4 minutes away from this show ending. I feel like we've only been live for like 15 minutes, but that Clippers news dropped and all of this shit went out the window because we have no idea what the Clippers are going to be doing. I assume we're going to get that starting lineup in about a half hour. I don't even know how much it truly matters. Like, it would blow my mind if Mann, Powell, and Zubats weren't in the starting lineup. And at that point in time, I think the rest of these guys just sort of have to start. Like I gave Amir Coffey 30 minutes. I only got to 9% of Amir Coffey anyway. If Brandon Boston happens to start I think he's a guy that you really need to make a move to try to get to. Point guard, shooting guard, flat minimum. He's the only guy that's out there that isn't like true garbage from a per minute perspective. But if Batum's starting, like, he's Nick Batum. He's a 0.8 guy on his best day. It's not something you really need to write home about. I think there's a lot of downside to Batum if he's out there. And if he's not starting, then you should feel pretty comfortable getting away or just hoping that the ownership isn't there. The only guy that I think can really be interesting if he starts is Brandon Boston, or if they somehow ran like Moses Brown on the opposite side of Zubats as well. And they went because it is Cleveland.
I know everything's in play. That's the thing. The matchup makes it so that everything is in play in terms of bigs and like your theory of what you think. I think Batum, though, has played enough for next to him that it would be very, very strange for me to imagine a scenario where that wasn't the starting lineup.
Agreed. This is a fascinating slate now. I'm just happy that I got all my shit in.
Yep, me too. I got to 28% Donovan Mitchell for what it's worth. The shooting guard eligibility, gigantic. It ended up getting me a little bit more TJ McConnell. I'm still underweight, 35% of him. I'm with you, though. Giannis, Ja Morant. I've got 83% Ja. I've got 50% almost on the number Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Here are my top 10 guys just from my exposure minus ownership. Ja Morant, Dylan Brooks, Najee Marshall, Jose Alvarado, Miles Turner, Duarte, Murphy, Mathurin, Brooke Lopez, Pat Connaughton. My biggest fades, McConnell, don't like it. Norm Powell, don't like it. Evan Mobley, don't mind it. Buddy Hield, I can handle it. Cheering against him on Prize Picks. Batum, I'm totally fine with. It scares the hell out of me. Joe Val at 7,100. Willie Hernan Gomez. I don't have either one of those guys really. Drew Holiday, Darius Garland, Andrew Nembhard. There's not too much that scares the shit out of me there. At least one, if not two of those guys are going to be a problem. I just need them to be not like aggressive problems.
Gotcha. You ended up getting to Mathurin.
I did. I always do. I tend to project him a little bit higher than everybody else. I got 25%. We got him at 18.5. So it's not exactly like a gigantic stand.
Okay. Yeah. I just thought that was curious. Miles Turner, my big fade. I can't imagine. And I love Miles Turner as a basketball player. I think I talk about him a lot. You've really been in the Miles Turner camp, but yeah, being underweight today does not feel good.
It's fascinating to see what he's doing and what Sabonis is doing right now, because I would still clearly take Turner. And I think that would be like a very minority opinion to the general public.
Well, the general public loves stats and loves that pure impact. You can't play playoff basketball on one end of the floor.
Nope. No, you cannot. This is fun, man. We're a minute away from lock.
Yeah, I reran one thing to update, and now I'm getting it up. And we are ready to rock. I'm definitely a little bit higher, I think, on some of the Clippers than you, it would seem. I'm getting to a lot of Norman Powell. I think everybody is. And then Zubats, Batum, two guys that I think just fit nicely into lineups. I'm happy to get to a little bit more of them.
And to be fair, I like Norman Powell. This is another guy that on the surface, I think projects very, very well. 6K shooting guard, small forward. He grades out really well for me. He's a fantasy point per minute guy. I'm just really nervous about how all of the minutes go for the Clippers for this game. The last time they had a bunch of guys out, January 18th. I'm going to just read the numbers of minutes for the guys that played. I'm going to throw Jason Preston in the garbage here because he played 5 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I looked at it, but yes.
26, 26, 29, 23, 23, 19, 19, 23, 24, 21. That's just everybody just sort of played. Everybody got this flat exposure. That's no Kawhi. That's no Paul George. It's worse now, but I can see this just sort of being like everybody plays like 28 minutes, and it would, unless the Clippers are in this game, which is like a 15, 20% chance. If this game is competitive, then I think you're getting like 36 out of Powell, 36 out of Zubats, 36 out of Mann, and those guys are going to be a real problem. If this game just even is generally uncompetitive, I think you're getting the opposite five guys for the Clippers in their closing lineup, and I think you're getting all of the garbage trash at the bottom of Cleveland, and you're going to be happy that you don't have this game. Those are the only two paths that I see this really going.
Go Brandon Boston.
There we go. I have 7%, so we'll see where we end up. We'll see what happens when we get starting lineups as well. Guys, we are done here. Go watch some football. Thank you for being here. Eric, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, going to go make some showdown lineups. First game could not have possibly gone worse for me. So, yeah, hopefully hopefully we see Patrick Mahomes, vintage Patrick Mahomes coming up next.
I'm going to go eat some meatloaf and go hang out with the wife. So good luck tonight, everybody. I hope I don't have to make any crazy swaps. Let's just get the right lineups and let's just sit back, relax, watch some football, and move ourselves on to Monday. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Thank you to No House Advantage. We're out of here. Peace.